Welcome to the programme. The Prime Minister may not be a golfer, but touring Donald Trump's Scottish courses today, so Keir Starmer has tried to make the most of an opportunity to shape the President's thinking, crucially on Gaza, urging President Trump to pressure Israel on what the PM says is now an absolute catastrophe.
We have to get to that ceasefire and we have to increase humanitarian aid in, and thank you for what you've already been doing, are doing and are committed to. Because without you, this would not be capable of resolution. And then we've discussed a plan for what then happens afterwards. I think we can do our very best to alleviate what is an awful situation at the moment.
Sky News has been aboard one of the Jordanian planes making aid drops after Israel shifted on humanitarian access, though it insists there's no widespread hunger or starvation. But criticism is growing louder and more unprecedented. Two leading human rights organizations in Israel have declared what no other major Israeli group has since the start of the war.
Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. This crime must stop immediately. The primary responsibility lies with the Israeli government.
It is another charge that Israel vehemently denies. More to come on that later in the programme, but we'll begin tonight with this report from our US correspondent, James Matthews, who's in Aberdeenshire.
On Scotland's west coast, it had the look of friends reunited. When President met Prime Minister, the bagpipes played and stopped for no man, nor news conference.
She is a respected person all over the United States. I don't know what he's doing, but she's very respected. As respected as him. I don't want to say more, I'll get myself in trouble.
It was sweetness and light until it was serious. The music had stopped when both men started to talk Gaza and an escalating crisis.
Those children look very hungry, but we're giving a lot of money and a lot of food, and other nations are now stepping up. I know that this nation is, right
It's
here.
a humanitarian crisis.
Right.
It's an absolute catastrophe. And nobody wants to see that. And I think people in Britain are revolted at seeing what they're seeing on their screens. So we've got to get to that ceasefire. And thank you, Mr. President, for leading on that, and also to just get more and more aid in.
See, Biden didn't have this kind of press. One report.
Trump boasted of a big audience before he delivered big news on Russia. He'd given Vladimir Putin 50 days to reach a peace deal with Ukraine or face sanctions. That has changed.
I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting. There's no reason in waiting.
Following a weekend's golfing, the Monday media appearance saw President in talkative mood. He had previously dismissed questions about his links to Jeffrey Epstein, convicted sex trafficker. Not here. He chose to address the story that he'd sent Epstein the hand-drawn picture of a naked woman.
I'm not a drawing person. I don't do drawings of women, that I can tell you.
And Trump spoke of falling out with Epstein and reiterated that he'd never been to his private island where crimes took place.
He stole people that work for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again, and I threw him out of the place, persona non grata. I threw him out, and that was it. I'm glad I did, if you want to know the truth. And by the way, I never went to the island, and Bill Clinton went there supposedly 28 times.
This is the seascape to where President Trump travelled next, wind turbines and all. Of that site, he takes a dim view. Not so the golf course up the coast. He flew with the UK Prime Minister to Aberdeenshire's Balmedy estate. He'll end his Scottish trip here, opening a golf course in honour of his late mother.
Mr. Trump, go home!
There was a small anti-Trump protest a short distance from the golf course as Donald Trump headed in their direction. And there was this, a few hundred yards from the shore at Trump's course, a boat sporting a Palestinian flag sped along a stretch of the coastline, followed by the police as they prepared for the president's arrival. It is public protest in contrast to the warmth of Donald Trump's politician hosts. There's no doubt that Trump and Starmer have built a good relationship. What they built on it is the question. The UK's Prime Minister came here looking to stress the urgency of the situation in the Middle East and between Russia and Ukraine. The signs are that the President is listening to a Prime Minister increasingly styled as the Trump whisperer. Away from the public gaze, refining the trade agreement with the US is a priority for Keir Starmer. His vision for a deal is one that doesn't come with a guarantee. The Trump whisperer will be wary of sweet nothings. James Matthews, Sky News, in Aberdeenshire.
Let's go live now to Scotland and speak to our correspondent Conor Gillies at the Trump course where the President and Prime Minister are staying tonight. And Conor, just to pick up on where James Matthews left off there really is a friendship that started to grow between these two men. And it feels very much like they enjoy each other's company, and Keir Starmer does what he needs to do to get President Trump on board on some of these issues.
Yeah, good evening, Yalda. I think that's right. Over the past few days, Donald Trump has been talking up the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. That moment began from the second he left the White House at the tail end of last week, describing Sir Keir Starmer as a good man, as a good guy. And clearly he feels relaxed, given the circus and questions around the Jeffrey Epstein saga. He has been dodging the questions from reporters, including us here at Sky News, as he made his way around the golf course on the Turnberry estate in Scotland over the weekend. But today, among friends, among the bromance, as James described it, the holiday bromance that he has struck up with the President and the Prime Minister, came some more details, some more comeback, if you like, to the questions around Jeffrey Epstein, saying that he had not spoken to Jeffrey Epstein in years. Look, the Prime Minister and the President have now arrived here in Aberdeenshire, and the situation in Gaza is foremost on the minds of those who are entering these discussions. Clearly, the pair talked about that situation today, the horrifying pictures of the children who are starving there. And clearly, Sir Keir Starmer is under international pressure to be more forceful on his approach around that. Will that be a point of discussion over the dinner table tonight? Well, clearly, also in the room is the Scottish First Minister as well. And he made clear his plans to talk to President Trump about the situation between Israel and Gaza. A bit of light in all of this as well. We are expecting Donald Trump to cut the ribbon on a new course named after his late mother, who was born here in Scotland. That is where the focus comes tomorrow. Tonight, it's all about dinner, and clearly all the people in the room will be walking a tight diplomatic rope.
Conor, thank you so much for that update. Now, Israel is again allowing countries to parachute aid packages into Gaza. So far, drops have been made by Jordan and the UAE, and the IDF is pausing military operations in some places for 10 hours a day. But let's just have a look. This graph, using analysis by our data and forensics team, goes some way to explaining the desperation in Gaza. 3,000 trucks carrying food and water crossed into Gaza in 1 week in January. Compare that with just over 100 trucks that went in last week. It's even more stark when you look at fuel and gas deliveries. During the first 2 months of 2025, an average of 121 truckloads were going into Gaza. Since the blockade ended in late May, it's been down to an average of 2.5 truckloads a week. Our correspondent Sally Lockwood was on board one of the Jordanian planes making aid drops today and sent us this report.
We're on our way to Gaza with the Jordanian military. As we get closer, it gets more tense. The parachutes prepared to drop food and baby formula from the sky. The crew making every effort to unload in an unpopulated area.
To give you an idea of the effort involved, this is
around 8 tons of aid, and in a lorry you could move around 20 tons by road. Dropping food from the sky is a deeply flawed and undignified way to feed people. But the need in Gaza is so urgent. The Jordanian crew say it's simply an attempt to do something. Then it's a rush on the ground to get to it. And it's become a lethal fight. Our Palestinian sources say gangs have been controlling the aid, punching, even stabbing people to get to it. And most critically, it's not getting to those who are starving.
I came only for my son. I wouldn't come here if it was just for me. When you have a child, he needs bread. I'm an engineer. The aid came from the sky, and we have to run after it. I've never had to do this, never in my life. Either you are shot trying to get food, or you're killed in the conflict.
We are asking for the borders to be opened and for the aid to come in. We are asking all the nations. I'm just trying to get some flour or pasta. I couldn't get anything.
What could really make a difference is an influx of aid by road. It's hoped Israel's humanitarian pauses will rapidly increase food distribution, but it's very unclear how this is going. Gaza's hospitals have reported another 14 deaths from starvation in the last 24 hours, and airstrikes have killed another 41 people, according to local media. We can't verify these numbers because Israel has not allowed international journalists access to Gaza. We were even told filming shots of Gaza from the air could result in these aid flights being cancelled. Anything left standing is damaged. It's just fields and fields of grey ash. Just devastation. But Israel's tight grip hasn't stopped the images of horror getting out. The question now is what more the international community will do about it. Sally Lockwood, Sky News over Gaza.
Well, earlier I spoke to Volker Turk, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. I began by asking him to respond to claims by the Israeli Prime Minister and others in his government that there is no starvation in Gaza.
Look at the pictures that we see every day. Look at the reports that you hear from my colleagues from the United Nations, from the humanitarian colleagues. They talk about the fact that the aid hasn't come in any meaningful way for the last couple of weeks. We need at least 400 trucks of massive humanitarian assistance to go in. That hasn't happened. So, yes, there is a very, very serious humanitarian situation in Gaza. And it unfortunately has affected children, it has affected women, it has affected not only malnutrition, but we have these reports of starving children.
And today, even in the last few days, President Trump has said things like, children look hungry, you cannot fake these images. But in your view, is that enough? I mean, we continue to hear condemnation from the international community, but it doesn't really make Israel change its position.
I think we need to move from a global outcry to concrete action. And concrete action means, and I mentioned it yesterday in a very strong call ahead of the conference that is taking place in New York today about the two-state solution, is actually to put pressure on this Israeli government to change course. We need a permanent ceasefire. We need massive humanitarian aid to come in. We need the release of all hostages, but we need all of this now. Not tomorrow, we need it now.
There are some who are criticising this lead that France is taking to recognise eventually Palestinian statehood, saying that perhaps they're starting at the end of the process and there is a lot that needs to be done before the Palestinians get to statehood. For example, the ceasefire that you're talking about, getting aid to those who need it, putting an end to this current situation in Gaza. What are your views?
I mean, it is so important to focus on the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people. And I welcome the conference because it brings us back to where the solution lies for Israelis and Palestinians to live side by side in peace. The only way to do it is through a two-state solution. That's been the position of the international community all along. And when you are in war, and in the horrors of war, we forget what the actual solution is. And we need to find the peace precisely to achieve a political solution of this kind. So yes, it is important to focus on what brings an end to this unspeakable suffering that we see.
So what would you say to President Trump? What would you ask him to do in this moment?
War is not the answer. We need peace. We need to bring back a political solution to a decade-old problem and a conflict that really needs to find an end. Because the only way for both communities to live side by side is through a political solution, a two-state solution that I hope this conference will at least get the political momentum behind it so that we can find that solution in the end.
And what we're seeing at the moment, though, in Gaza, and we've spoken a little bit about this, is the humanitarian catastrophe, as Keir Starmer has described it. We continue to see the pushback from this Israeli government. And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation says that what they're doing is sufficient.
Well, it is absolutely not sufficient. We know that we need massive humanitarian aid. You have seen over the last day or so, there is a bit of a change on the part of the Israeli authorities when it comes to this, but it's still not enough, by no means enough. There needs to be massive humanitarian assistance that has to go in. There is a UN coordination system that works. Why not use this to the fullest? And that's what we're asking.
Yes, and Israeli officials and the GHF have pointed the finger of blame on the UN, saying that the aid convoys are there, but the UN is not distributing it properly and effectively.
So I can tell you one thing. The UN is ready to do its job, has always been ready to do its job if we are allowed to do it. And that's the big ask. Let us do our work. Let our colleagues, the humanitarian colleagues, let the NGOs that are working with us do our work. We had 400 distribution centers. We can activate this, but we need not red tape and we need not blockage. We need unhindered humanitarian access now.
You've also criticised the UK's ban on Palestine action. Just tell me why.
The label of terrorism is a very grave one. It should not be confused with freedom of expression, freedom of protest, freedom of assembly. What we have seen with the banning of Palestine action is a chilling effect on what is a legitimate exercise of human rights. Because when it comes to declaring anyone a terrorist or a terrorist act, it has to be in relation to grave bodily harm. It needs to inflict terror in the population. None of this is the case with Palestine action. So I think one has to be making a very clear distinction between what terrorist offenses are on the one hand and what issues of freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and protest are.
And just finally, Mr. Volker, how would you describe the current situation in Gaza?
Beyond dystopian. It's one of those situations within my own long life career with the United Nations where words fail me.
That was Volker Turk there. Now, in New York, the UN General Assembly brought countries together to discuss the future of a two-state solution. But while Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa was there, Israel sent no one.
We, I think, agreed that recognizing the Palestinian state is a must. And to those who argue that this should be the outcome of negotiation, where are the negotiations? There is no negotiation. The Palestinians are ready to negotiate today. We do not have an Israeli partner to negotiate. So if they're not willing to sit at the table and negotiate a two-state solution, which the whole world agrees is the path forward, then they cannot veto us from doing what we all believe in and recognize the Palestinian state as a statement of commitment to that solution.
Jordanian Foreign Minister there. Let's speak to our US correspondent, David Blevins. And David, no real surprises that Israel and the United States have boycotted this conference.
Yes, no surprise whatsoever. The conference lasting 2 days is exploring the steps that would need to be taken to reach a two-state solution. But the US and Israel, of course, say that would undermine their current efforts to achieve peace in the region, despite the fact that those negotiations appear deadlocked right now. France and Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, who are co-hosting the conference, say a two-state solution is the only viable route to lasting peace in Gaza and in the wider region. Now, of course, the conference also comes after France said it would recognise the state of Palestine. Spain, Ireland and Norway, other countries did that last year. In fact, Yalda, 145 countries have now done so, and member states today were calling on others to follow suit. In fact, the former president of Colombia, a former Nobel Peace Prize winner, Juan Manuel Santos, who was a keynote speaker, urged the United Kingdom particularly to show leadership on this. So it's going to be very interesting to hear what David Lammy has to say. The Foreign Secretary arrived in New York a short time ago and is expected to address the General Assembly tomorrow. From the contributions I heard, there were two key themes really emerging: complete outrage over the scale of the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza right now, and also a determination that Israel cannot be allowed to veto any two-state solution by simply not turning up for events like this. And there was a real sense of urgency throughout the meeting. Who would be Keir Starmer right now, though? On one side, you've got the President of the United States saying, don't recognise the state of Palestine because it undermines peace efforts. And on the other side, you've got the United Nations saying it's time to recognise the state of Palestine because it will help peace efforts. It's going to be a very big call for the Prime Minister when he makes it.
Yeah, absolutely. David, thank you so much. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme, I'll speak to one of the leading human rights groups in Israel that's accused the country of committing genocide. Stay with us. Also ahead, wildfire rages across southeast Europe, fanned by extreme heat. We'll look to a worrying week ahead.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
He did it very affectionate. He, Daddy, you're my daddy.
Leicester is on its knees. It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
The founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. Two leading human rights groups in Israel today declared their conclusion that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights Israel are longtime critics of the government, but they are the first major organizations within the country to level the charge since the war began. Well, it's an assessment already reached by others, including the UN Special Committee to investigate Israeli practices. South Africa's government filed a genocide case against Israel late in 2023 at the International Court of Justice, while Human Rights Watch has accused Israel of committing acts of genocide in its conduct of the war. Here's some of what B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights Israel had to say. Have a listen.
Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. This crime must stop immediately. The primary responsibility lies with the Israeli government, but also with the international community to take every measure permitted by international law to put an end to a crime that continues to claim victims at this very moment, just 70 kilometers away from here.
For the past 22 months, we have witnessed unprecedented levels of civilian killings, of deliberate starvation, forced mass displacement, and the total destruction of most infrastructure necessary for human and social existence.
Well, Dr. Guy Shalev is the Executive Director of Physicians for Human Rights Israel. Thank you so much, Dr. Shalev, for joining us here on the programme. This report, these two reports came out today. Just tell us a little bit more about how you came to this conclusion and the findings.
Right, so our analysis focuses on health, on Israel's attack on Gaza's healthcare system and all life-sustaining systems in Gaza. We are looking into the attack day by day, month by month, delineating the attack on hospital after hospital, looking on the blocking of aid, and basically not allowing any possibility of survival for Palestinians in Gaza. Looking into this the data we are collecting, the legal analysis, we come to this conclusion that this is genocide.
And you point the finger of blame on the Israeli government. The report also says the evidence shows a deliberate and systematic dismantling of Gaza's health system. How has the Israeli government responded to this?
Well, we know how the Israeli government responded for the past 22 months when we are addressing the government, addressing the military, addressing everybody that we can, the courts, the high courts, the Israeli high court. All these bodies were not able or were not willing to stop the attack and stop the attack on Gaza's healthcare system. We look at the convention, the Genocide Convention. Article 2C of the convention claims that you can commit genocide by attacking conditions of life, by this systematic infrastructural attack on life. And unfortunately, we see that Israel's actions fulfill this article.
You primarily focus on the dismantling of the healthcare system in Gaza. Have you looked at, also the fact that aid is not entering Gaza, and there has been a blockade, which the world is saying has led to the starvation, and we've seen these horrific images on our screens for months?
Right, and what the images we're seeing now are the result of many, many months of policies taken by Israeli leaders, and the result, as we see, are just horrendous. Blocking of aid for many, many months, the weaponization of aid. Israel dismantled the international community's system of distribution. There were 400 distribution centers for aid, and Israel dismantled that, putting in place something that I would not even call GHF, because it includes the word humanitarian in it. It's basically a weaponized project of putting in place killing stations, 4 stations, providing aid for 15 minutes a day, forcing 2 million people to fight for food. And when that happens, you know what the result is, because those who can fight may get the food. But what about the elderly? What about children? What about pregnant women? And then we see the images and the unfortunate cases of dying of starvation in the past few weeks, especially.
And I'm just going to read the Israeli government spokesperson's response, David Mencer, who says there is no intent, which is key for the charge of genocide. It simply doesn't make sense for a country to send in 1.9 million tons of aid, most of that being food, if there is an intent of genocide. I just want to get your response and reaction to that.
Right. The question of intent is indeed a very important question. And we look into this question by analyzing act by act, policy by policy of the Israeli government. And what we see that the systematic aspects of these policies infer intent. And the Israeli claims that they are allowing in humanitarian aid does not preclude the option of destruction of the conditions of life of Palestinians. What Israel is doing in the past 22 months is committing genocide, but also trying to do that without getting the world to intervene. And they are doing it very successfully. The world is not intervening. And what we're seeing is a slow death, slow maybe in proportion to what Israel would claim is a genocide, but definitely a very tragic death of thousands and thousands of people. And unfortunately, because we are dealing with the healthcare system, we expect these deaths to continue many months. Even if there's a ceasefire today, we're going to see people keep dying because there aren't any MRI machines to diagnose people sick. There is no cancer treatment. There is no diabetes treatment. People are just going to continue dying. And that's the effect of this attack, unfortunately.
And how would you like to see the international community respond? Because we do see statements of condemnation, and Donald Trump in the last few days has acknowledged the fact that Palestinians are starving, and he said these images can't be faked. But what would you like to see these world leaders do in this moment?
So first of all, it's not what I would like to see, it's the obligation. It's the obligation of countries, of third countries, according to the Genocide Convention, to interfere and stop a genocide. So it's the obligation of each and every country to do that. What we've been seeing in the past months, in the past almost 2 years, is basically inaction. I've been talking to politicians in all European and North American countries, and I've been asking them, what are the red lines? When are you going to put red lines in place and change the policy that you decide to engage with Gaza? And then we're not seeing any red lines. Sometime in 2024, we thought that maybe Rafah is going to be a red line, but then that was crossed. And Israel sees that. It sees that there aren't any red lines. They can continue their attack with no consequences. And the result that they just continue this genocide without interference.
When you do ask what the red lines are, what is their response?
Unfortunately, these are the saddest responses I've heard. Some politicians say we don't have any. We're frank with you, we don't have any. We didn't discuss it, we don't have red lines. And I'm talking about conversations I had maybe a year ago already. And some are just saying that we're not going to reveal what our red lines is or are, but still, the reality on the ground is very clear. And I have to add that as a health-focused organization, as an organization that fights for the right to health, we also have expectations from the global health community. We expect doctors, medical associations around the world to interfere, because it's not just a legal question whether it's genocide or not. It's a humanitarian, it's an ethics question. We need to interfere for the sake of humanity.
Dr. Shalev, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, Thailand and Cambodia agreed to a ceasefire in a conflict partly driven by a feud between two former leaders.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, DC.
Welcome back. Thailand's Thaksin Shinawatra and Hun Sen of Cambodia, two powerful prime ministers who used to be close, but their falling out has been consequential helping drive a conflict between their countries that only reached a ceasefire today. Here's a reminder of what happened. Let's have a look. Tensions ramped up in May when a Cambodian soldier was killed in a brief exchange of gunfire with Thai soldiers along the disputed border. Fighting flared last Thursday when 5 Thai soldiers were wounded in a landmine explosion. Thailand says 12 people, including 1 soldier, have been killed by Cambodian shelling. Cambodia says 13 people have been killed on their side, including 8 civilians. More than 260,000 people on both sides of the border have been displaced. With me now is Ben Bland, Director of the Asia Pacific Programme at Chatham House. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us here on the programme. I mean, this is a dispute that goes back decades, and they are complicated relationships between the two groups.
Yes, certainly. So we know the dispute over the border goes back at least 100 years, back to when France was in control over Cambodia, what's Cambodia today, and Thailand was the only non-colonised country in Southeast Asia. And we've had a flare-up about 10 to 15 years ago when there was violence, there were deaths, not as bad as now. So you have to ask yourself, what's different this time? Because the disputed border, the disputes around the temples along the 800-kilometre border between these countries has been there for quite a while. So I think it is to do with the factions in these two countries, the domestic politics, and these two families really in control of both, which have fallen out seemingly in the last few months.
Yeah, and it involved leaked phone calls and, the fact that, as you say, they've got good relationships between the two, and then it's led to a breakdown of relations between the two nations.
Yeah, so here we're talking about Hun Sen, who's been really in control of Cambodia directly or indirectly for 40 years, and Thaksin Shinawatra, who was the former prime minister, then he was ousted, his sister became prime minister, and then his daughter before she was suspended because of this conversation leaked by Hun Sen. But as you said, in the past, Thaksin was very close to Hun Sen, but there seems to have been some sort of breach between the two. And Hun Sen really seems to have been trying to do the dirty, as it were, on Thaksin. It seems to be he who's somehow shifted his view, and he leaked this phone call that led to the suspension of Thaksin's daughter as prime minister. And I think that really escalated what was already happening on the border, where I think both armies had clashed a few times, but it's this elite clash that has really escalated things and led to, quite deadly violence. More than 30 people killed in the last few days. There were airstrikes, rockets, artillery, etc. So it's quite worrying, and it's good to see this ceasefire now. The question is how long it can hold.
Yeah, and that's the big question. Malaysia was pivotal in this, in bringing the two sides together. Just talk us through that.
Yeah, so Malaysia is currently the chair of ASEAN, which is the regional body for Southeast Asia. And the way ASEAN works, the Secretariat doesn't normally get involved, but it's the chair country that takes the lead. They were quite quiet in the first few days as the violence escalated, which was really concerning. You would hope a regional body would step in and precisely this kind of situation when two of your member states are fighting and killing each other's citizens. But I think belatedly, Anwar Ibrahim, who's Malaysia's prime minister, did start to put pressure on both countries to come to the table. And I think, to be honest, both Thailand and Cambodia probably were looking for an off-ramp in the short term. They've fought before, they've killed each other's citizens, but they've also found these off-ramps before. So I think there was a pattern. And I suspect in the short term, they were looking for de-escalation. I think Malaysia facilitating those talks really helped. And there was also pressure, of course, from the US and to a certain extent, I think more in the background from China.
Yeah, and I just want to talk through I've got about a minute left, but just the role the United States played in all of this, because there's a lot of credit going to Donald Trump at the moment for it.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump is obviously the chief giver of credit to Donald Trump looking for his Peace Prize. Look, both of these countries have big trade deficits with the US, they have big manufacturing industries, and they have huge tariffs slapped on them. So I'm sure the fear that he may seek to put further trade pressure on them added to the sense that they needed to de-escalate in some sense. But I think it's much more about their own internal dynamics. And it was Malaysia in the end, as you said, that facilitated the talks. I don't think the US was in the weeds of what's been agreed in terms of the ceasefire, the meeting of the armies, and hopefully a meeting of the Border Commission, which is in the end what needs to happen if they're to move forward with some sort of medium-term ceasefire and any kind of resolution. But I think a resolution is a long way away. Just some kind of medium-term de-escalation would be good for now, but much will depend on Thaksin Shinawatra and his family and Hun Sen and his family.
Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, parts of southern and southeastern Europe stretching down into Turkey face a dangerous week ahead from wildfires. Turkish firefighters have described apocalyptic scenes. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports.
In Greece, fire season started early. Weeks later, flames now burn in multiple parts of the country. This is what they did to properties just north of Athens over the weekend. Authorities have been working round the clock to try to stop them from spreading, fighting the flames from the air and the ground, trying to cool the blistered land. But this is all it takes to spark a fresh blaze and devastate another community. In neighbouring Turkey, it's a pain they know all too well. On Friday, temperatures hit a record high of 50.5 degrees Celsius in Salopi, the enduring heat adding to the misery of weeks of wildfires. In Bulgaria, authorities are battling more than 90 blazes, the flames fanned by strong winds. Thousands of police and firefighters getting help from across the EU to try to bring the situation under control. And these summer fires are not just a risk to lives, but also livelihoods. Here, smoke's rising on the holiday island of Sardinia during peak tourist season. The flames cut off beachgoers near the resort of Villa Simius, meaning some had to flee by boat.
Oui, correct.
While in southeastern France, they surveyed the damage from a fire which caused the evacuation of 2 campsites and forced almost 1,000 residents from their homes. The latest casualties of the gruelling summer sun. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, the Lionesses bring it home again and are welcomed by huge celebrations after their Euros victory over Spain.